Medusa's gaze, turning men into stone. We've all heard the legend. Medusa, the monstrous woman whose gaze could turn men into stone. But what if this was never meant to be taken literally? What if turning to stone symbolized something far deeper, something sacred, powerful, and profoundly misunderstood? Today, we journey beyond the surface to reclaim the true meaning of Medusa's gaze and what it reveals about feminine power, the fragile masculine ego, and the awakening of truth. Welcome to the Dark Mother Mysteries. Who am I? I am Shadow Moon, priestess, oracle, and head mistress of this portal for forbidden wisdom and feminine sovereignty. If you are ready to rise beyond the distortion and reclaim the sacred truths buried beneath fear, subscribe now. Share this video and step fully into the reclamation of your divine power. Lesson 1: Captivation, paralysis, and all before feminine energy. Medusa's gaze turned men to stone, not because it was some magical curse, but because it held a mirror to their soul. She froze them, she stunned them, she mesmerized them. In the face of her presence, they felt powerless, unable to dominate her or diminish her energy. Medusa's beauty and presence demanded awe, respect, and humility. And for many men, that was overwhelming. They were captivated and paralyzed, caught in the thrall of her raw feminine energy, a force both beautiful and terrifying. They were not turned into literal stone. They were forced to confront the undeniable power of the sacred feminine. She froze them, she stunned them, she mesmerized them. And before the power of her presence, her undiluted beauty, her sovereignty, her radiance, they were captivated. They were humble. They were overwhelmed by the living force of something they could never possess or dominate. In modern language, we still carry fragments of this truth. We say a woman has beauty that stops you dead in your tracks. This is an idiom, a recognition that sometimes presence alone, true, radiant presence, is enough to disarm and stun. One powerful example of this comes from the film Black Panther, that's in the MCU, which is one of my favorite movies, by the way. In an early scene, T'Challa, played by the late and great Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, and Okoye, played by Danaya Guerrera, are tracking a caravan during a covert mission. Before they swoop down to intervene, Okoye warns T'Challa, "Don't freeze when you see her." Do y'all like my voice? Referring to Nakia, who was played by Lupita Nyong'o, T'Challa's former lover. T'Challa confidently responded, "I never freeze." But when he sees Nakia, radiant, powerful, unapologetically herself, he freezes in awe, in reverence, in captivation. His body halts, stunned by her beauty and presence, and it falls to Okoye to step in and protect Nakia while T'Challa regains himself. This moment, though fictional, mirrors an ancient truth. The feminine, when fully embodied, sovereign, unapologetic, holds a power that stops the unprepared masculine energy in its tracks. But here's where the story often turns darker. When some men are captivated and yet denied access, when they cannot control or possess what stuns them, they often flip the narrative. They demonize what they cannot conquer. They slander what they cannot claim. And this is exactly what happened to Medusa. Her power was not monstrous, it was mesmerizing. It was only the wounded ego of men, incapable of surrendering to all, that twisted her into a monster. And rather than honoring her all, patriarchy taught men to fear it, to fear the emotions that rose within them, and to demonize the woman who awakened them. Lesson 2: How the stone symbolizes the fragility of uninitiated masculine ego. The stone itself is symbolic. It is rigid, it is cold, It is unyielding. It represents the uninitiated masculine ego, the part of patriarchy that cannot stand in the face of feminine sovereignty. For men conditioned to see women as objects to control or conquer, Medusa's power shattered that illusion. When Medusa's gaze turned men to stone, quote unquote, it revealed the fragility of an uninitiated masculine ego, the part of the masculine that could not flow with emotional energy, that part that could not receive beauty without needing to control it, the part that feared vulnerability and responded by freezing. In myth, stone represents the masculine spirit paralyzed by its own ability to feel, to bend, and to trust. Rather than honor their discomfort and seek growth, they demonize Medusa, twisting her story to justify their own fear. Instead of admitting their paralysis was all, they called it horror. Instead of seeing her as a sovereign, they made her a monster. This is the story of patriarchy's relationship with the divine feminine, not just in myth, but in history and in our lives. True masculine energy, when awakened, honors feminine radiance with awe and reverence. But the wounded, rigid masculine, trained by patriarchy, seeks to either conquer it or destroy it. Lesson 3: Medusa's gaze as a mirror of truth, not a curse. Medusa's gaze was never about destruction, it was about truth. To look into her eyes was to see yourself, stripped of illusion, pretense, and falsehood. It was a mirror reflecting back the reality of who you are. She showed men who they truly were. If they approached her with arrogance, they saw their own hollow pride. If they approached her with domination, they met their own fragility. If they approached her with respect, they stood in awe before sacred power. For the unprepared, this was terrifying. But for the courageous, it was transformative. Medusa, in this way, became a monster. Medusa, in this way, became not a monster, but a guide, a force that demanded you face your fear and your truth. Medusa did not destroy them. Their own inability to withstand her truth destroyed their illusions. Her gaze simply revealed it. And the uninitiated masculine who could not withstand what was reflected back to them, hmm, they demonized her. And for those who couldn't, who refused to meet her gaze with honesty, she became their excuse. They needed to blame her rather than accept the fragility of their own egos. Why is her story this is why her story resonates today. Not just as a myth, but as a metaphor for the power of the feminine gaze. To awaken and embody this gaze is to hold a mirror up to the world, demanding truth, respect, and reverence. So instead of honoring that feeling, y'all, they demonized her. Just as colonial powers demonized African spirituality and practices, natural hair, and black beauty, patriarchy also demonized Medusa to erase the memory of a sacred feminine power that could not be controlled. Lesson 4: what it teaches about the power of the awakened feminine gaze. But what exactly do we mean when we speak of feminine gaze? The awakened feminine gaze is not about domination or control. It is energy of pure, sovereign presence that sees through illusions and mirrors as truth. The feminine gaze holds and reflects and reveals without flinching, without apology. It is a gaze rooted in wisdom, not aggression. It is the silent knowing that says, I see the real you, the real you. I see beyond your armor. I see beyond the facade. I see who you are and not who you pretend to be. To be seen in this way by a woman fully anchored in her own power and presence can be awe inspiring and disarming, and even terrifying to those unprepared to face their true reflection. The feminine gaze is a sacred mirror. It simply shines the light of clarity, and clarity for many is the most frightening force of all. When women awaken to their own power, when they reclaim their sovereignty, they embody the energy of Medusa. The awakened feminine gaze is not cruel, it's transformative. It stuns not because it seeks to harm, but because it demands respect. RESPECT, in the words of Miss Aretha Franklin. It compels the world to stop, to confront, and to honor the sacred power it cannot control. This is why Medusa's story matters, not just for the patriarchal myths she exposes, but for the power she calls forth within us. To all women listening, when you carry yourself with the sovereignty of Medusa, you embody a gaze that commands respect, not through fear, but through presence. You remind the world that feminine energy is not to be dominated, but to be honored. And this teaching is universal. For Black women, Medusa's story paralyzed the demonization of the divine feminine in African spirituality and beauty. The same forces that demonize locks, natural hair, and African goddesses like Medusa are the forces that sought to suppress feminine sovereignty across cultures. And yet, her energy still persists, rising through every woman who chooses to reclaim her own gaze, her own power, and her own strength. Medusa's gaze was never a curse. Today, we reclaim her truth. We remember the power of our own sacred gaze. Like Medusa, you are a force of sacred truth that cannot and will not be silenced. As always, thank you for journeying with me through the forgotten mysteries. I am Shadow Moon, priestess, oracle, and headmistress of the Dark Mystery School. Until next time, class is dismissed.